Bindi is doing so much better now, so things like a lot of travel are a bit challenging for her at the moment, and so she'll be...
There is a particular kind of courage that gets very little attention, not the kind that shows up in wildlife documentaries or conservation galas, but the quieter kind that involves continuing to show up for your life while your body works against you in ways most people around you cannot see. Bindi Irwin has been living that kind of courage for more than a decade, and the world is only now beginning to understand what that has actually looked like from the inside. The signals have been there for those paying close attention. An empty chair at a high-profile family event for the second year running, a mother who looked wearier than usual on a Las Vegas red carpet, a brother choosing his words carefully while trying to reassure a room full of people who wanted answers. What the Irwin family has been protecting behind their public conservation mission is a health story far more serious than most of their supporters realized. Endometriosis is a condition that remains significantly misunderstood despite affecting millions of people worldwide. It occurs when tissue similar to the lining of the uterus grows in locations outside it, causing chronic inflammation, severe pelvic pain, debilitating fatigue, and a range of other symptoms that accumulate over time and can make basic daily functioning genuinely difficult to sustain. For Bindi, the condition was present for more than a decade before she publicly named it in March 2023, and during those years she moved through an exhausting cycle of appointments, investigations, and consultations that failed to produce answers proportionate to what she was experiencing. Doctors struggled to connect her symptoms to a cause. She continued her work at Australia's zoo, her public appearances, her conservation advocacy, and her family responsibilities while carrying pain that was steadily worsening without anyone being able to explain why. When she finally found the right specialist and underwent surgery in New York City with Dr. Tamersekin, the procedure revealed exactly how much her body had been managing without anyone knowing. 37 endometriosis lesions were removed during that operation, along with a chocolate cyst attached to her ovary. The surgery was the moment of confirmation that the severity of what she had been experiencing was real and measurable, not vague or exaggerated. It brought genuine relief and a finally accurate diagnosis. But endometriosis does not resolve with a single surgical intervention. The condition is chronic, prone to returning, and requires ongoing management rather than a fixed endpoint. What the surgery in New York provided was not a cure but the beginning of a more informed approach to a long-term journey. The journey became considerably harder in spring 2025. Her symptoms returned and escalated at a moment when the family had been preparing for the second annual Steve Irwin Gala. And as her condition worsened, it became clear that surgery could not be delayed. What followed was not one procedure but a series of them, each addressing different aspects of what the disease had done and was continuing to do. An appendix removal, the extraction of 14 additional endometriosis lesions, and a postpartum hernia reconstruction were among the interventions required. Across all of her surgeries combined, 51 endometriosis lesions had been removed, a total that communicated the severity of her case without needing any further elaboration. Each surgery was followed by a recovery period that made demands on her time, her energy, and her emotional resilience. Extended recovery is not simply a physical experience. It carries its own psychological weight, particularly for someone who has built her public identity around physical courage and constant engagement with the natural world. Through all of this, Bindi kept most of the specific details private while being honest enough with her supporters to give them a real sense of what chronic illness requires. She was not performing wellness for an audience while suffering privately. She was genuinely navigating the unpredictable rhythm of a condition that does not follow calendars or schedules, and she spoke about it in ways that acknowledged the difficulty without collapsing into it. In August 2025, she shared that her painful symptoms had significantly reduced and that she was beginning to feel like herself again, a statement that carried real meaning for anyone who understood how long the path to that point had taken. But feeling better is not the same as being fully recovered, and the family's protective approach to her travel and public engagements in the months that followed reflected an accurate understanding of how fragile a recovery in progress actually is. The third annual Steve Irwin Gala, held at the Bellagio Ballroom in Las Vegas in early May 2026, made the situation impossible to avoid discussing in public. The event was designed as a night of tribute and celebration, transformed into an Australian outback atmosphere with ambassador animals among the guests, and the kind of gathering that would normally draw all three Irwin family members together with purpose and energy. For the second consecutive year, Bindi was not there. Her absence was noticed immediately, and the empty seat at the family table generated its own quiet statement before anyone had said a word. When reporters on the red carpet pressed Terri and Robert for explanation, what they offered was honest but carefully measured. Terri appeared visibly tired in a way that suggested the weight of the past 2 years had accumulated in ways that couldn't entirely be hidden by the occasion's glamour. She confirmed that Bindi was improving but explained that travel continued to present a genuine obstacle to her recovery. The specific detail she offered was the one that landed with the most force. It was less physically demanding for Bindi to stay home and feed crocodiles at Australia's zoo than to travel to Las Vegas for the gala. For anyone who knows what feeding crocodiles in the Crocoseum actually involves, including the physical demands, the precision, and the sustained concentration it requires, that comparison was not a downplaying of the gala's importance. It was a precise and revealing measure of how much international travel would cost Bindi in energy she needed for recovery. Terri added that Bindi would be there the following year, a promise that functioned as both reassurance and a marker for the progress they were still working toward. Robert spoke with visible pride about Bindi's role in managing Australia Zoo's operations while the family traveled, acknowledging the scale of what the zoo involves and the dedication it takes to hold things together from within it. What moved beneath both his words and Terri's was something unspoken. Bindi's recovery was real, it was moving forward, but it was also requiring exactly the kind of protection and patience that meant keeping her away from high-pressure environments, regardless of how much she might personally have wanted to be there. The gala became the moment where private struggle and public responsibility met most visibly, and what the family communicated in that meeting was both the truth of how difficult things had been and their genuine belief that the difficulty was not permanent. The family's collective approach to Bindi's illness reflects something important about how they operate under pressure in general. Terri has taken on the role of balancing transparency with protection, sharing enough to keep supporters genuinely informed while being careful not to add external pressure to a recovery that requires as much calm as it can get. Robert has stepped into expanded responsibilities at Australia Zoo and in public-facing roles, absorbing duties that would normally be distributed more evenly across the family. Neither of them has allowed Bindi's absence from certain events to be framed as a failure or a retreat. They have consistently presented it as the right decision, made with care, which is both true and reflects a mature understanding of what healing actually requires. Both Bindi and Robert have spoken about the role that Dancing with the Stars played in their lives, and for each of them the experience carried significance that went well beyond a television competition. For Bindi, dancing during a period marked by chronic pain offered something she described as feeling close to flying, a rare physical experience of freedom and joy that contrasted sharply with the constrictive reality of what her body was regularly putting her through. She won the Mirrorball Trophy in 2015, and the achievement represented more than competitive success. For Robert, who competed in a later season and won to become the youngest male champion in the show's history, the experience became an unexpected space for emotional expression and the kind of vulnerability that his public role as a conservationist rarely invited him to demonstrate. Robert's dedication night tribute to his mother stands as one of the most genuinely moving moments the competition has produced. He spoke about Terri's resilience after Steve's death when Robert was just 2 years old, about the way she had held the family together and continued the conservation mission during a grief that would have been sufficient reason to stop. His dance became a public declaration of a gratitude that had been building across his entire life. When Terri joined him on stage and they embraced, the audience saw 20 years of shared loss and shared purpose condensed into a single visible moment. The judges recognized both the technical quality and the emotional weight of the performance, and the response from everyone watching confirmed that the Irwin story connects with people far beyond the boundaries of wildlife conservation. Robert competed through a rib injury discovered during rehearsals that made breathing painful for 11 weeks of practice, a circumstance that added a particular resonance to everything the family has been navigating around Bindi's health. He and his partner Whitney Carson adapted their routines to manage the physical limitation while maintaining the standard required to compete seriously. The fact that he completed the season and won it despite the injury reflected the same quality of quiet determination that has characterized the family's approach to every setback they have encountered. His acceptance of the trophy, with Terri, Bindi, and Grace Warrior, Bindi's daughter, celebrating from the audience, captured something real about where the family has arrived after everything the past years have contained. Grace Warrior's presence in the Irwin family story represents the forward direction of everything the family is carrying. Born in 2021 and growing up inside the rhythms of Australia's zoo, she is absorbing from her earliest years the connection to wildlife and conservation that has shaped 3 generations of her family. For Terri, Robert, and Bindi, her existence is evidence that the work continues forward and that the mission Steve devoted his life to is not simply being maintained, but actively growing into new hands. The approaching 20th anniversary of Steve's death carries enormous emotional weight for the family, and their willingness to speak openly about grief, about the way it shifts over time, and about the experience of holding both deep sorrow and genuine happiness simultaneously, has created a connection with their supporters that goes far deeper than admiration for their conservation work. Bindi's recovery continues, and the Irwin family continues alongside it, with the same combination of honesty and determination that has defined them through every challenge they have faced. The conservation work at Australia Zoo goes on through a daily schedule that involves wildlife management, rescue operations, visitor education, and the kind of hands-on commitment that Steve made his public identity. Robert regularly encounters people who tell him that Steve's work inspired them to become conservationists or to care more deliberately about the natural world, and each of those encounters reinforces what the family already understands: that the reach of what Steve built extends far beyond what any of them can track or measure. Terri has spoken about her approach to grief in terms that many people have found genuinely useful, describing the experience of holding both happiness and deep sadness simultaneously rather than allowing one to crowd out the other. She believes that truly honoring someone who has died means continuing to feel the full range of what life contains, including joy, and that narrowing your emotional life to only grief would be a form of diminishment rather than loyalty. That perspective has shaped how the family speaks about Steve publicly, and how they approach the milestone of the 20th anniversary of his death, with something that looks like both sorrow and gratitude in equal measure. The broader commitment to conservation that Steve established remains the framework within which all of the family's personal experiences, including Bindi's illness, Robert's growing responsibilities, and Terri's role as the family's steady emotional anchor, continue to unfold. Their story is unusual because it combines experiences of genuine loss and significant hardship with a public platform built on optimism and a love of the natural world that has never appeared manufactured or performed. The empty chair at the gala will be filled again, and when it is, the people who have been paying attention through the harder chapters of this story will understand exactly what that moment has cost and what it represents. The Irwin family has been carrying something heavier than most of their supporters realized, and the fact that they have carried it while continuing to show up for their mission says something specific and real about who they are beyond the cameras and the conservation events and the wildlife they protect.